everybody, it's Courtney and I'm here with another video for Not Too Shabby. Today I'm going to be creating card number 2 using the Super Duper Stamps stamp set by Sunny Studio, and again pretty much creating a very simple one-layer card. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of masking, very simple masking, but I love the look of it. So I have 2 little strips of Simon Says stamp masking paper here, and these are each 1/4 of an inch wide. And I'm using my grid mat to make sure that they are completely straight with one another. I'm just kind of estimating how much space I'm going to want in my ink blended area before laying down my second piece, but I am also using that grid mat to make sure that it is completely straight and will be the same as the first, if that makes sense. Also going to take some Post-it note tape and add a little bit to the top and bottom, just leaving a little bit of space between the 2 masks, and I am eyeballing that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out my image, and I'm just using one of the images from the stamp set. I'm going to go ahead and stamp that out with Blackout ink by Ink on 3 because it is a Copic safe ink, and I will carefully mask him out as well. His little arms and legs are pretty skinny, so it's almost impossible to get the mask perfect, but we'll fix up those areas later. So next I'm going to be doing some ink blending here, and I am using traditional distress inks. I accidentally grabbed an oxide here in the beginning because I have them all scattered on my desk because I'm a very messy crafter, but I'll go back in and add the regular distress ink. I am using mustard seed and worn lipstick, and you can see that I'm kind of just blobbing on the color. I'm not really too concerned about where I'm putting it. I don't need these colors to blend, but I want these colors to shine through a little bit once I add my night sky. So I'm going to start off with some faded jeans, and I'm pretty much covering up everything. I'm going in with a pretty light hand because I know I'm going to be adding a ton more color, but this will kind of just give me an idea, or give me a base coat, I should say. Next, going in with some black soot, and I'm just adding this to the top and to the sides of my card panel, just in those masked areas. I'm not bringing it in too far because I don't want this to be completely black, but I want my edges to be the very darkest. Next, going to bring in some chipped sapphire, and I have just the ink cube here, which I don't particularly like working with, but I don't have the full-size ink pad, and I'm just going to blend out that black soot and bring that closer to the center where those colors are. Going to finish off again with the faded jeans, and here I'm just going to finish covering up everything, and you can kind of see how that pink and the yellow kind of shine through just a little bit. You can see it a little bit more in real life rather than on camera. But to add some stars in the background, I'm going to take some shimmer spray, make sure that is shook up very well, and then just take the nozzle and spatter that pretty much everywhere. I'm using a lot of spatters here, and I'm pretty close to the paper so that I have a little bit more control as far as where the spatters are going to go. Just going to dab that up with a paper towel, and to add even more stars, I'm just going to use some inexpensive white acrylic paint here. Squeeze a little bit of that out onto an acrylic block, and then take a paintbrush and add a little bit of water to that just to kind of water that down or thin that out a little bit. Just going to mask off the bottom portion of my card panel with that paper towel because it's there, and just going to spatter this around as well. Now, I did let this dry for about a half an hour before moving on to the next step, especially removing your masks, because the masks are paper and they are wet. So you want to be super careful when you do remove your masks. The Post-it note tape and the strips of masking paper aren't too difficult, but you can see on the very top, some of it seeped through, probably from the dampness of the shimmer spray, but we can fix that later. For the mask of the stamped image, I just used my scissors to kind of get that started, because even this mask, after sitting for about a half an hour, it was still damp. So you just want to be super careful. You can see in that top left-hand corner, it is kind of smudged, but we'll fix it later. So we are going to move on to the Copic coloring. Kept the coloring on this pretty simple. I am going to use my Copic markers naturally, and I'm concentrating my shading being off to the right hand side and kind of towards the bottom of the image itself, just because of the way he's facing and the way he's positioned. I start off with my lightest color to map out the darkest areas, then I move on to the darkest color, the midtones, and then back to that lightest color. For his hair, I am going to start off with my darkest color just because I like to maintain those flick lines. To me, it just gives the hair a little bit more texture. I am creating a little part for him. He doesn't really have one drawn into the illustration, but you can always create that just by adding a little bit of shading. Once I added my lightest color, which is the Y23, I realized that I kind of lost those flick lines. So I'm just going to very quickly and just with the tip of my marker add a few more flick lines with that E15 just to get that texture back into his hair. Now for his mask and for most of his little superhero outfit there, I'm going to switch over to some greens or some YG markers. My darkest color is the G07, which is pretty dark in comparison to the rest of the colors I'm using, but this will give you the contrast. So if you're not getting the contrast you're looking for when you're doing any kind of alcohol marker coloring, try to go one step darker with your darkest color. And it's kind of scary to use these really dark colors because you don't want your image to be too dark, but trust me, it will give you the contrast you're looking for. Just use a teeny tiny bit of it. So for the rest of his little outfit and his cape there, I'm going to switch over to some blue markers here. And again, starting off with my lightest color to get the paper saturated a little bit to let my colors blend a little bit easier. Going in with that darkest color, again, concentrating my shading being towards the bottom of the image. You can see that his little cape there is kind of folded towards the top. So I am going to create a shadow where it's folded over on itself as well. And this will add just a little bit more dimension to the image as well. Finishing off with the B00 as my highlight color, and then I realized I left a little piece of that cape that is between his little legs there, and I just went in with my B16 to fill in that area because that would naturally be a little bit darker. Going to take my B99 with just the tip of my marker, barely touching the paper, and fix up those white areas that were around my mask where I didn't mask all that great. So next we're going to move on to the sentiment, again using my grid mat here just to make sure that my two sentiments are lined up well before popping them onto an acrylic block. I have a piece of navy blue cardstock here. I treated that with my anti-static tool. Then I will go ahead and stamp my image, or not my image, my sentiment with VersaFine ink. And nope, Versamark ink, and realized I stamped that super crooked, which is normally no big deal if you're cutting it into a sentiment strip, but it just makes it a little bit easier if you can actually stamp it straight. So I flipped around my card panel, treated it again with my anti-static tool, stamped that straight this time, and I am sprinkling on some white Hero Arts embossing powder and then heat setting that with my heat gun, making sure that my heat gun is heated up for a few seconds before bringing that to the paper. This will minimize your warping. Next, bringing out my tonic paper trimmer and trimming this down to a sentiment strip here. You will want to make sure your embossing powder is completely cooled down before you do that, or else it can kind of scrape off the paper a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up with some foam tape here right underneath my little sky scene or night sky scene here. And then I'm going to go ahead and bring out my gel pen and fix that area up where my mask didn't really work out too well. My gel pen wasn't flowing out very well. The ink was not flowing out. So I just rubbed that on my finger and kind of heated up the tip with the warmth of my skin, I guess you could say. And then that will flow out a lot easier. Going to add a little bit of sparkle with some Nuvo Aqua Shimmer Pen, and then I will add a few Dream Drops. Oh, this is where I realized I forgot to color the inside of his mouth. So I'm not doing any shading here, just keeping it nice and simple. And then I will add the Nuvo Dream Drops just around that sentiment strip. But that is it. That is the card for today, guys. As always, I will leave the supplies listed below. And don't forget about your discount code to the Not Too Shabby shop. Thanks, guys. Bye.